Picture this. It's the bottom of the 10th of a scoreless game. The center fielder just singled, giving the crowd a sense of hope. Your star player takes a few practice hacks before stepping into the batter's box. The pitcher anxiously waits. He winds up and deals. The ball sails over the wall. The game is over. The final score, 1-0. This is Gone, Untold Stories of America's Pastime. I'm your host, Manny Gomez. Prior to 1920, baseball as we know it today was fundamentally different. The situation you just heard in the cold opening occurred in a game between the Boston Red Sox and the Cleveland Indians on
July 8th, 1918.
That was David Neft, an American pioneer best known for writing the first ever comprehensive baseball encyclopedia, which was published by Macmillan in 1969. Anyway, we know about the July 8th, 1918 situation because of David Neft. You see, a little over 50 years after the fact, in 1969, the significance of this situation rocked the baseball world for about 1 week. Now, a little over 50 years after that, it's one of baseball's most obscure stories. This is Episode 1, Baseball Odyssey. In an article posted on May 1st, 2017 on 538, Rob Nair quotes John Thorne, a Major League Baseball historian, as saying, "This was the Moby Dick of baseball statistics, not only for its size, but also for its place in baseball history." I like to call it a baseball odyssey, because in order for David Neft and his team to put the book together, they had to go on an epic journey through time, all the while overcoming obstacles in order to create the nearly impossible. The journey began in 1954. David Neft was 17 years old, working a summer job at a summer camp. Neft was too young to be a camp counselor, so he worked as a gate man where his boss would tell him to bring stuff to read, because he'll have plenty of time to do nothing. So what did David Neft do?
Well, I figured out how many books I would have to bring to read and decided I needed a better plan.
A better plan is a nice way of saying that David Neft, who literally by now already found a love for mathematics, worked out precisely how many hours of downtime he would have and decided that stocking up on books was a bad idea. Instead,
the Turk and Thompson Baseball Encyclopedia had been published by A.S. Barnes and Company in 1952, and I got a copy of that book. And I took that book and a pad of paper and pen and started doing research, looking through the book, and among other things, getting interested in and familiar with 19th century Major League Baseball, which I had known really nothing about before then. And that led me to have the idea in the back of my mind that someday it would be neat to do a bigger, better baseball encyclopedia.
Neft figured out, decades before Bill James would revolutionize the way we look at stats, that the information fans were being given concerning their favorite teams and players was really limited.
For batters, they have position for each year, games played, and batting average. For pitchers, instead of batting average, they have win-loss record.
Okay.
And that's it.
That's it. Sure, Turk and Thompson's encyclopedia was not the place for the most comprehensive stats, but there were ways to get them.
If you wanted the active players, there was the Baseball Register, published by the Sporting News. And of course, there were all the guides every year.
Okay. And those featured more stats.
Those featured more stats, but the guides only covered 1 year.
Okay.
And the Baseball Register only had active players.
Okay. Fast forward to 1966. What if I were to tell you that the whole reason for David Neft's 1969 Baseball Encyclopedia has nothing to do with baseball, but rather technology?
In 1966, the Information Concepts Incorporated, small company that I was with, who was headed by an ex-IBMer, we were invited to go to Radnor, Pennsylvania, and look at the new installation, computer installation for TV Guide. And TV Guide had regional editions for every major market. So setting type on a weekly publication for all those editions was an incredible job. And we saw how IBM computers were going to be used to set the type.
This was a game changer. Prior to this advancement, there used to be linotype machines. There were big blocks of type, which looked like kids' toys, each one with a letter. Then, there was a board that had rows on them. A person would have to physically pick out the letter and put it in the proper place on the board. It was a long and arduous task, to say the least.
Once you could set type electronically, it changes what you can do with a big database book, because you can build a database and then write the software for the formats and never have to set type and never have to proofread. So the book that I did could not have been done before this technology was available. And in fact, the Baseball Encyclopedia in 1969 was the first book of any kind published in the United States that was electronically typeset.
With this technology in hand, David Neft was ready to take on the challenge of creating the first ever comprehensive baseball encyclopedia. First, David Neft established a team of researchers. Then, they devised a plan.
We divided baseball into 4 groups by years, 4 historic groups, built around the major leagues' official sheets. An official sheet is the record of each player for a year, organized day by day. There were copies of these official sheets, microfilm copies, at the Baseball Hall of Fame in Cooperstown.
It's important to note that official sheets started in 1903 in the National League and 1905 in the American League. Before that, there was nothing.
So the 4 periods we used were, first period was baseball before official sheets. The second period was from the start of official sheets through 1919. Third period was 1920 to 45, and the fourth period was 46 to 68.
David Neft and his team's objective was to have the book be as understandable for the fan as possible. That meant using modern scoring rules where there's a difference. Given how rapidly rules were changing in baseball, creating this type of uniformity in bookkeeping was something short of a miracle. For example, the RBI didn't come into the official records until 1920. So to collect RBI stats pre-1920, Neft and his team would have to delve deep into every single game. As you might have guessed, however, Neft had a plan.
Then we developed a operational plan for handling each of the 4 periods, starting with the most recent, which is the easiest. What the plan was to enter into a database the official sheets from 1946 through 1968. And to write software are mostly, there are a couple of minor exceptions, a double entry bookkeeping system. So for any game, the hits given up by the pitchers has to equal the hits made by the batters, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And we would use that software to detect if there were any errors, either caused by faulty data entry or caused by a mistake in the official sheets.
The period post 1920 was relatively easy to account for. The real work, so to speak, came when collecting the data for the periods before 1920. So how did David Neft tackle this problem?
So we had a big crew, we had terrific researchers going to libraries. There was no internet then. And we had made up forms, entry forms, and they would collect this missing information from hometown newspapers of both the home team and the visiting team.
Okay.
And we checked those to see what it looked like the right information was.
It wasn't always that easy, however. In the period before 1920, with no TV or radio or internet and most games being played during the day, most of the information Neft and his team collected came out the day after the fact. But things weren't always so difficult either. Neft and his team did run into some luck. As it turns out, there was this man named John Tattersall who was from Philadelphia and had recently retired. As a hobby, Tattersall kept a log.
He kept a log of every home run ever hit in Major League Baseball, which eventually went to Sabre and became, they keep it up. And he had a collection of newspapers from this period of time, from 1876 through 1900 for the National League. And he produced stats for the National League for those years.
But wait, there's more. Not only does Big Mac contain comprehensive baseball stats, if you wanted them, it also contained detailed demographics.
One of the people involved in this was Lee Allen, who was the historian at Cooperstown. And he had Cy Thompson, one of the authors of the 52 book, he had his file of index cards of demographic information about the players, which Lee and a group of people associated with him then added to, and Lee put into loose leaf notebooks. So we used that, and we had a small team within the big team of researchers working on the demographics, filling in the blanks, as well as the new players, on all the demographic information that's in the book. I mean, first name, middle name, last name, date of birth, place of death, place of birth, date of death, place of death.
All told, it took Neft and his team 2 years to complete the book. In all, people were really excited about seeing the first book ever to be electronically typeset. For the first time ever, fans were going to be able to get every player's stats up to date and in grave detail. And then came April of 1969. That is when, for 1 week at the end of the month, it was announced that Babe Ruth's home run total would be changed to 715. The baseball world went mad. The presenting sponsor of Gone, Untold Stories of America's Pastime, is Audible. Go to audibletrial.com/GonePod to get a 30-day free trial and a free audiobook download. Don't like the book? You can swap it for free. Cancel anytime, and you can listen on any of your devices, anywhere, at any time. That's audibletrial.com/GONEPOD. And now, back to the show. In April of 1969, word got out through the media that Babe Ruth's all-time home run record was not actually 714, but instead it was 715. How did this happen?
There was a committee established for this book, which consisted of 5 people.
Dave Brody, PR director for the National League, Bob Holbrook, PR Director for the American League, Joe Reichler, PR Director for the Commissioner's Office, Jack Lang, the Secretary-Treasurer of the BBWA,
and me. And this committee passed on all changes in scoring rules through the years and how we were going to handle them. Okay. And the first thing we did as a committee was to establish a general philosophy. And that is, our objective was to have the book that we produced be as understandable for the fan as possible. And that meant using the modern scoring rules where there is a difference. And the best example of the significance of that is in 1887, baseball, trying to promote itself more through offense, counted bases on balls as hits in computing batting average.
Okay.
So that Tip O'Neill led the American Association with 492, what today we would basically call an on-base average. Mm-hmm. But never got any credit for it because everybody figured it was because of the rule. So we decided, in this case and in a lot of cases, to apply the current rule to what went on at that time.
Okay. This was fine with the general public and the committee until the great Bambino stepped into the fray.
Ace of clubbers, king of clout. On every diamond he jacked them out. He was the big Bambino, the Sultan of SWAT. Hercules in pinstripes, with the biggest bat and the biggest heart. He was Babe Ruth, the king of them all. Babe Ruth, the name says it all.
In conducting their research, Neft and his team uncovered 37 cases in which a sudden death home run was not credited as a home run at all. Way back on page 2329 of Neft's Baseball Encyclopedia, in Appendix B, number 17, it says, before 1920, when the team batting last won the game in the ninth or in an extra inning, the ruling was that the team could not win by more than one run. If a man hit an outside-the-park home run, which under present rules would have resulted in a victory by more than one run, he was given credit for a lesser hit, and only the winning run counted. Mr. Neft provides a better example.
Before 1920, entire history of baseball before 1920, if I'm going to create a fictional story here, if the score was tied in the bottom of the ninth inning, and there were men on first and second, and Joe Smith comes up, and Joe Smith hits the ball fair into the seats, he was only credited with the hit that would have been necessary to score the winning run. In other words, Joe Smith would have gotten a double and 1 RBI, no runs scored, no home run. Mm-hmm. And we found 37 of these cases. Okay. And the committee voted, being consistent with our philosophy, to change those records and give Babe Ruth. One of them was Babe Ruth in a game against Cleveland, July 8th, 1918, when he was with the Red Sox. Okay. And he hit such a home run in Boston. And that got a lot of attention.
Mm-hmm. Every major paper ran the story. It was the equivalent of a modern-day sports scandal. Just imagine what SportsCenter would be like. As a result, on May 5th, 1969, the committee reviewed their ruling and reversed their decision to change the original call. That is why today, when you go on baseballreference.com or Fangraphs, Ruth still has 714 home runs. That walk-off home run went down in history as a triple. When asked if this was the only rule that the committee voted to change their decision on, this is what David Neft had to say.
If there had been 36 and not Ruth, the change, the reversal never would have happened.
At this point, the closest player to the record was Willie Mays. Willie Mays, however, was 38 years old and had 124 home runs to go before he reached 714. The record was nowhere near in danger. But
for some reason, which is both good and bad, fans regard baseball statistics as being inviolate and 100% accurate. And for modern stats, that's true. When you go back in history, it's not true. Wasn't true in 1969. It's not true now. People are going to continue to find more things. But people can't handle the idea that Ty Cobb's lifetime batting average is 367 plus or minus 2 points.
baseball is tricky, considering that for over a century now, the pace is virtually the same, that the baseball diamond is still virtually the same, that Fenway Park and Wrigley Field still stand. There's a tough balancing act you have to play when making changes, especially when it comes to stats. Baseball is the only sport where you can recite stats from memory. Most consecutive games with a hit, 56 games. Most consecutive games played, 26-32. Single season home run record, 73. Wins record, 511. Most World Series titles, 27. And finally, home runs by the Babe, 714. This is a Welcome to the Show production. Visit WTTSpod.com/gonepod to get more information on this episode and more. Special thanks to David Neft. King of Them All, performed by Murderers Row. You can find the link on WTTSpod.com/gonepod. Make sure you follow me on Twitter at MannyGo3. You can read my stuff on calltothepen.com. Also, don't forget to go to audibletrial.com/gonepod to get your free audio book. That's audibletrial.com/GONEPOD. Peace.